I watched my sister raise a crystal flute of vintage champagne, her laughter tinkling like broken glass against the silence of the room. She was toasting to her own brilliance, completely unaware that the vibrating phone in her designer clutch was about to detonate her entire life. 2 hours ago, I was the charity case, the failure she kept around to make herself feel taller. Now, legally speaking, I owned the roof over her head, and she was trespassing. But before I let the police knock on that heavy oak door, I wanted to sit back and enjoy the show. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The sound coming from under the hood of my Honda was not a rattle, and it was not a hum. It was a grinding screech, metal eating metal, a mechanical scream that set my teeth on edge. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, silently praying to whatever God watched over single mothers and failing transmissions. Please, I thought, just get us to the driveway. Just let me survive Christmas Eve without calling a tow truck I absolutely cannot afford. I glanced at the dashboard clock, but the digital display had burned out 3 months ago, so I had to guess the time. It felt late. The winter sun was already dipping below the tree line, casting long, skeletal shadows across the highway. Beside me, Cassie sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, staring out the window. She was wearing the navy blue velvet dress we had found at the Salvation Army on Tuesday. I had spent 4 hours carefully shaving the pilling off the fabric with a razor blade and steaming out the wrinkles in the bathroom, trying to make it look like something purchased at a mall. Cassie shifted, pulling the hem of the dress over her scuffed boots. "Mom, do you hear that noise?" she asked, her voice small. I forced a smile, the kind that hurt my cheeks. "It is just the cold, sweetie. Old cars hate the cold." I hated lying to her. I hated that at 14 years old, my daughter knew the sound of a failing alternator better than she knew the sound of a cello, but the truth was too heavy. The truth was that I had $42 in my checking account. The truth was that if this car died, I would lose my job at the clinic because there was no bus route that ran early enough for my shift. The truth was that we were driving into the lion's den, and we were limping. I looked back at the road. The landscape was changing. The tight, cluttered rows of apartment complexes and strip malls were smoothing out into rolling hills and stone fences. We were entering Victoria's world. This was where the air smelled like wood smoke and money. "Are you sure Aunt Victoria will like the present?" Cassie asked. She was clutching the bag in her lap like a lifeline. It was brown paper, tied with twine because I could not afford glossy wrapping paper. "She will love it," I said, pushing down the nausea rising in my throat. "It is thoughtful. Thoughtful is better than expensive." I tried to believe it. I tried to convince myself that a handmade scrapbook of our family history, meticulously assembled over 3 weeks of sleepless nights, would mean something to a woman who bought her handbags in Paris. I thought about the glue burns on my fingers and the smell of old photo paper. It had to be enough. It was all we had. The car shuddered violently as we crested the final hill. The engine coughed, a deep hacking sound that made the frame vibrate. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped the gas pedal gently, coaxing the beast forward. "Come on," I whispered. "Don't do this to me. Not today." Cassie looked at me, her eyes wide with that specific heartbreaking panic of a child who knows they are poor. "Mom?" "It is fine," I said, my voice too loud in the sudden silence of the cabin as the engine leveled out. "We are almost there. Just look at the lights, Cass. Look how pretty they are." I pointed ahead, but my eyes were scanning the dashboard for warning lights. We were rolling on momentum now. I just needed to make it to the driveway. I just needed to park the car and hide the evidence of our struggle before my sister saw us. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and anxiety, and prepared myself for the performance of a lifetime. The house, no, the estate, loomed out of the twilight like a fortress. Victoria and Thomas had bought it 8 months ago, but seeing it in photos did not prepare you for the physical weight of the place. It was all gray stone and towering turrets, a monstrosity of modern Gothic architecture that screamed exclusion. The driveway was lined with trees wrapped in thousands of identical white lights, creating a runway that seemed to demand a luxury vehicle. I did not drive up to the front door. I could not. The idea of my rusted, sputtering Honda sitting next to Thomas's pristine Mercedes and Uncle David's BMW was physically painful. It would be a stain on their perfect picture. I pulled over to the curb about 3 houses down, killing the engine before it could make that dying screech again. "Why are we parking here?" Cassie asked, unbuckling her seatbelt. "To get some fresh air," I lied smoothly. "And I want to make sure your hair is perfect before we go in." I turned in my seat and reached out to smooth a stray lock of her dark hair. She looked so much like me at that age, only more fragile. I had been hardened by necessity. Cassie was still soft, still hoping the world would be kind. I adjusted the collar of her thrifted dress, praying the stitching I had repaired would hold. "You look beautiful," I told her. She gave me a nervous smile. "You too, Mom." I looked down at my own outfit, black slacks that were 2 years old and a red sweater I had borrowed from a coworker. I felt like an imposter. I felt like a child playing dress-up in a world of adults. "Come on," I said, shoulders back. "We are Mitchells. We can handle anything." We walked up the long, winding driveway in the biting cold. The wind whipped at our faces, but I kept my head high, clutching the tin of homemade cookies in one hand and gripping Cassie's hand with the other. The gravel crunched loudly under our boots, announcing our arrival like a drum roll I did not want. By the time we reached the massive front door, my toes were numb. I hesitated for a second, my hand hovering over the doorbell. I could hear laughter from inside, warm, muffled, expensive laughter. It sounded like a different planet. I took a breath that rattled in my lungs and pressed the button. The chime was deep and resonant, echoing through the house. We waited and waited. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15. Finally, the door swung open. Victoria stood there, framed by the golden light of the foyer. She looked like she had been airbrushed into existence. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car, and her blonde hair was styled in loose, perfect waves. She held a glass of wine in one hand, her fingers manicured to a lethal point. She blinked at us, her blue eyes sweeping from my wind-blown hair down to Cassie's scuffed boots. There was no warmth in her gaze, only a clinical assessment of our flaws. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "You are here. Not Merry Christmas. Not come in, it is freezing." Just a statement of fact, delivered with a tinge of disappointment. "Merry Christmas, Victoria," I said, forcing warmth into my tone. I stepped forward, expecting a hug, but she pivoted smoothly to the side, avoiding contact. "You are late," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "We told you 2 o'clock. It is 2:15. "We ran into some traffic," I said. She raised an eyebrow, a microscopic movement that conveyed volumes of skepticism. "On Christmas Eve? In this town? Right. Well, come in. Do not let the heat out." We stepped across the threshold and the door clicked shut behind us, sealing us in. The transition was jarring. 1 second we were in the biting wind, and the next we were submerged in a sensory overload of wealth. The air inside was thick and warm, smelling of cinnamon, fresh pine, and that distinct crisp scent of expensive perfume. A 12-foot fir tree dominated the foyer, dripping with crystal ornaments that caught the light and scattered rainbows across the marble floor. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. It was designed to make you feel small. Victoria set her wineglass down on a side table that looked like a museum piece. "Let me take your coats," she said, extending a hand. "We do not want to get dampness on the furniture." I peeled off my puffer jacket. It was old, the down filling clumping in the bottom hem, and the zipper stuck halfway down. I had to yank it, the sound ripping through the polite quiet of the foyer. Cassie took off her denim jacket, revealing her velvet dress. She shivered, not from cold, but from exposure. Victoria took our coats with 2 fingers, holding them away from her body as if they might be contagious. "I will just put these in the mudroom closet," she said. "The main closet is full of guests' things." I watched her walk away carrying our outer layers like trash bags. She was separating us already. Our coats were not good enough to touch the furs and wool trenches of the real family. I looked at Cassie. She was staring at her feet, her hands clasped tight in front of her. I squeezed her shoulder. "Look at the tree, Cass," I whispered. "It is pretty, right?" She nodded, but her eyes were darting around the room, taking in the grand staircase, the chandelier, the paintings on the walls. "Is everyone else here?" she whispered back. Before I could answer, a voice boomed from the living room. "Is that Jordan?" I stiffened. It was my mother. We walked into the main living area. It was cavernous, with a roaring fireplace that could roast a whole pig. My mother, Martha, was sitting in a high-backed armchair near the fire, holding court. She held a crystal tumbler of scotch, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Uncle David and Aunt Linda were on the sofa, and Thomas stood by the bar, mixing drinks. "Hi, Mom," I said, stepping into the circle of light. Mom looked up. She did not smile. She looked me over, her eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on my sweater. "Jordan," she said, "you made it, and you brought the little one." "She is not little, Mom." "She is 14, I said, keeping my voice level. "Hi, Cassie. Give Grandma a hug." Cassie moved forward obediently, leaning in to hug my mother. Mom patted Cassie's arm awkwardly, stiffening against the contact. She did not hug back. She tolerated the affection, like a statue tolerates a pigeon. "My goodness," Aunt Linda chirped from the sofa. "Is that what you are wearing, dear?" I felt Cassie shrink. I stepped in, physically placing myself between my daughter and my aunt. "It is a velvet dress, Linda. It is for the holidays. It is very vintage," Uncle David said, chuckling. He swirled his drink. "I remember when those were in style in the 90s. "It is classic," I said, my voice hardening. Victoria glided back into the room, smoothing her cashmere. "All right, everyone. Dinner is almost ready. Jordan, since we have a full house, I set up a spot for you and Cassie in the dining alcove. It is more intimate." I knew what that meant before she even led us there. The dining room was a masterpiece of tablescaping. The long mahogany table was set for 8, gleaming with silver chargers, crystal goblets, and linen napkins folded into swans. There were place cards written in calligraphy. Candles flickered in gold holders. But that was not where we were sitting. Victoria pointed to the far corner of the room, near the swinging door to the kitchen. There was a card table, the kind with vinyl padding, set up with 2 folding chairs. It was lower than the main table, wobbling slightly on the rug. "I thought you two would want to catch up without all the boring business talk," Victoria said, smiling that toxic, sweet smile. "Plus, we did not want to squeeze everyone in." I looked at the main table. There were 6 empty chairs. There was plenty of room. This was not about space. This was about hierarchy. "We are fine here," I said, because what else could I say? I could not flip the table. I could not scream. I had to swallow the bile and sit down. We sat. The folding chair creaked under my weight. I looked at Cassie. Her face was burning red. She kept her eyes on her empty plate. "Mom," she whispered, "why are we sitting here?" "Because they are rude people," I wanted to say. Instead, I leaned in. "It is like a private party, just for us. We can make fun of Uncle David's toupee without them hearing." Cassie managed a weak smile, but the damage was done. The rest of the family filed in. They took their seats at the high table, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor. They laughed and clinked glasses. We were 10 feet away, but we might as well have been in a different time zone. Dinner was served by catering staff, people who looked at me with pity as they set down plates of prime rib and truffle mashed potatoes on our vinyl table. The food smelled incredible, rich and savory, but to me it tasted like ash. I watched them. I watched Thomas bragging about his latest merger, his voice booming. I watched Victoria preening under my mother's adoration. "Victoria, this roast is divine," Mom gushed. "You have such a talent for hosting. You really are the glue of this family." "Thank you, Mom," Victoria said, casting a glance toward our corner. "I just try to make things nice. I think presentation is everything, do not you?" "Absolutely," Uncle David agreed. "It shows you have self-respect. Unlike some people who let themselves go." He did not look at me, but the air in the room shifted. I gripped my fork until my hand cramped. They were talking about me. I was the ghost at the feast, the cautionary tale they used to make themselves feel successful. "How is work, Jordan?" Aunt Linda called out, raising her voice as if I were deaf. "Still at that clinic?" "Yes," I said, clearing my throat. "We are very busy. Flu season." Wiping noses, Thomas laughed. "Noble work. Someone has to do the dirty jobs, I suppose." "I am a nurse, Thomas. I save lives." "Sure, sure." He waved a hand dismissively. "I am just saying, it is not exactly building an empire, is it?" I looked at Cassie. She had stopped eating. She was pushing her mashed potatoes around her plate, building a little wall to hide behind. I reached under the table and found her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. I squeezed them, transmitting a silent message. "Hold on. Just hold on." After dinner, we moved back to the living room for gifts. This was the part I had been dreading the most. Victoria went first. She handed out boxes wrapped in gold foil with silk ribbons. She gave Mom a designer handbag that smelled of leather and status. Mom actually teared up. "Oh, Victoria," she gasped. "It is stunning. You spoil me." "I just want you to have the best," Victoria said, kissing Mom on the cheek. She gave Uncle David a bottle of scotch that was older than I was. She gave Aunt Linda diamond stud earrings. For Thomas, she revealed a set of golf clubs that probably cost more than my annual rent. Everyone oohed and ahed. The room was thick with the smell of greed and gratitude. Then it was my turn. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy. I walked to the tree and picked up the brown paper packages. I handed the tin of cookies to Aunt Linda and Uncle David. "Snickerdoodles," I said. "Cassie and I made them yesterday." "Oh," Linda said, looking at the tin. "How sweet." "We are watching our sugar, but thank you." She set the tin on the floor, next to the leg of the sofa. She did not open it. I turned to Victoria. I held out the square package. "Merry Christmas," I said. Victoria took it. She felt the weight of it, her brow furrowing. She tore the paper, not carefully, but ripping it apart. She pulled out the scrapbook. It was heavy, bound in faux leather. I had spent weeks scanning old photos, writing captions, finding ticket stubs from when we were kids. It was a history of us, a reminder that we were sisters. Victoria opened the cover. She flipped a few pages. "Oh," she said. The silence in the room was deafening. "What is it?" Thomas asked, leaning over. "It is a book," Victoria said. She held it up. "Look, it is photos of us when we were kids. And look, she pasted in little stickers." She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Did you make this yourself?" she asked, looking at me. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "I thought you would like to have the memories." "It is very crafty," Victoria said. "Very DIY network." Thomas snorted. "It is cute, like a middle school project." Heat rushed up my neck. I felt my face burning. I had poured my heart into those pages. I had cried over those photos, remembering a time when we did not hate each other. "I like it," Cassie said suddenly. Her voice was loud, piercing the mockery. Mom worked really hard on it. Mom looked at Cassie, then at me. "It is a nice thought, Jordan," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But maybe next year just ask Victoria what she needs. We are adults. We do not need arts and crafts." Victoria closed the book and set it on the coffee table, burying it under a pile of discarded wrapping paper. "Well, thank you," she said, dusting her hands as if the glue were still wet. "It is certainly unique." I stood there, stripped bare. I wanted to grab the book and run. I wanted to scream, but I was frozen. And then Victoria stood up. She clapped her hands together. "Actually," she said, her voice changing pitch. It became serious, authoritative. "While we are all here, I have something important to discuss." She walked to the fireplace, claiming the center of the room. She looked like a predator circling a wounded animal. The room went quiet. The air pressure seemed to drop. Mom looked at Victoria with a knowing smile. Thomas leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. They knew. Whatever this was, they knew. "It is about Grandma's trust fund," Victoria said. My stomach dropped. I felt the blood drain from my face. Grandmother had died 5 years ago. She had left a substantial trust for Victoria and me, to be distributed when the youngest, me, turned 30. I was 34 now. For 4 years, Victoria, who managed the family finances, had told me the market was down, that the assets were tied up in complex bonds, that we had to wait for the investments to mature. I had trusted her. I had trusted her because she was my sister. "What about it?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, reedy. Victoria sighed. She looked at me with a pity that felt like a slap. "I have been trying to protect you from this, Jordan," she said. "I really have. But since you are asking about money again—" "I did not ask about money," I said. "You are always asking about money," Thomas interjected. "It is all you talk about." Victoria held up a hand to silence him. "Jordan, the truth is, there is no money for you." I stared at her. The words did not make sense. "What do you mean?" "Grandma left it to both of us. 50-50. "She did," Victoria said, "but she also left conditions. Specific stipulations in the will regarding family unity and responsibility." She walked over to the sideboard and picked up a manila folder. She opened it and pulled out a stack of papers. The will stated that to maintain your beneficiary status, you had to attend the quarterly family estate meetings, she said. It was a clause to ensure we stayed connected, to ensure the money was managed by people who actually cared about the family legacy. She looked at me, her eyes hard. "You missed them. All of them." "What meetings?" I asked. I stood up. My legs were shaking. Nobody told me about any meetings. "We sent emails," Mom said from her chair. She swirled her scotch. "We sent notifications." "I never got an email," I said. "I checked my email every day." "Well, maybe they went to your spam folder," Aunt Linda suggested helpfully. "Or maybe you just did not think they were important enough to open." "This is insane," I said. I looked around the room. "You cannot just take my inheritance because I missed a meeting I did not know about. It is not just one meeting," Victoria said. "It is 5 years of negligence. You forfeited your share, Jordan. It is in the contract." She slid a document across the coffee table toward me. I picked it up. My hands were trembling so hard the paper rattled. It was a legal document dense with jargon, and at the bottom there was a signature. It was my name. It looked like my handwriting. I stared at it. The loops, the slant. It was perfect. "I never signed this," I whispered. "The signature says otherwise," Thomas said. "My firm verified it. It is ironclad." "You forged it," I said. I looked up at Victoria. "You forged my signature." Victoria gasped. A theatrical, hand-to-the-chest gasp. "How dare you?" she hissed. "I have been managing this family's money for years. I have grown our wealth while you scraped by. And now you accuse me of a crime? You are stealing from me," I said. My voice was rising. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and angry. That money was for Cassie. It was for her college. "It was for the family," Mom snapped. "And clearly you are not part of this family. Look at you, making a scene on Christmas, accusing your sister of felonies. You are unstable, Jordan. You always have been." I looked at my mother. Her face was twisted in disgust. There was no love there. There was only judgment. "Mom," I said, "please. You know I did not sign this. I know you are irresponsible." she said coldly. "I know you borrow money and never pay it back. I know you are jealous of Victoria. I do not borrow money," I shouted. "Stop yelling!" Cassie cried out. She was standing up now, tears streaming down her face. "Stop yelling at my mom." Victoria turned her gaze to Cassie. "Oh, sweetie," she cooed. "I am so sorry you have to see your mother like this. It must be so hard for you, having a mom who cannot control herself." That was it. That was the line. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the homemade scrapbook. "Come on, Cassie," I said. "We are leaving." I did not wait for a response. I grabbed Cassie's hand and pulled her toward the hallway, my grip tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I could feel the eyes of my family burning into my back, a collective glare of judgment and relief. They were glad I was leaving. I was the stain on their perfect tablecloth, and I was finally removing myself. "Jordan, stop!" Victoria called out. Her voice was not loud, but it carried that sharp, authoritative pitch she used when scolding a waiter. "You are being dramatic." I kept walking. I dragged Cassie into the mudroom, the temperature dropping 10 degrees instantly. It smelled of damp wool and mud. I found our coats dumped in a heap on a plastic bench, my puffer jacket tangled with Cassie's denim one. I snatched them up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely find the sleeves. "You are proving my point," Victoria said. She was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. She had not stepped into the cold room. She stayed on the heated marble. "Running away because you do not like the truth. This is exactly why grandmother did not trust you with money." I shoved my arm into my jacket, the zipper catching on the lining. I ripped it free, hearing the fabric tear. I did not care. I just wanted to be gone. "You stole from me, Victoria," I said, spinning around to face her. I looked at her perfect face, her perfect hair, the diamond pendant resting in the hollow of her throat. "You can spin it however you want with your fake meetings and your forged signatures, but you and I both know what you did." Victoria sighed, a long, weary sound that suggested I was an exhausting toddler. "I am going to attribute this outburst to your situation," she said. "I know stress makes people say crazy things. When you calm down and when you are ready to apologize to Mom and Thomas, give me a call. Maybe we can help you with some groceries or something." The condescension tasted like copper in my mouth. She was offering me charity with money she had stolen from my daughter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lung across the room and shake her. But I looked at Cassie. She was huddled in her coat, her face buried in the collar, trying to disappear. If I screamed, I was the crazy one. If I fought, I was the unstable single mother they claimed I was. "I am not the one who needs help," I said, my voice low. I opened the heavy back door. The wind hit us like a physical blow, stripping away the warmth of the house in seconds. "Drive safe," Victoria called out, her voice cheerful again, as if she were bidding farewell to a pleasant dinner guest. "That car sounds terrible. You really should get that looked at." I slammed the door, shutting off her voice, shutting off the light, shutting off the lie. The walk to the car was a march of shame. The gravel crunched loudly in the darkness, every step a reminder of our retreat. The wind bit through my thin slacks, stinging my legs. I could see the warm, golden glow of the mansion windows behind us. I could see the silhouettes of my family moving inside, probably pouring more wine, probably laughing about how Jordan finally snapped. I unlocked the Honda. The door creaked in the cold. Cassie slid into the passenger seat without a word. I got in and slammed the door, sealing us inside the freezing metal box. I stared at the steering wheel. This was the moment. This was the terrifying variable. If the car did not start, we were stranded here. I would have to go back and knock on that door. I would have to ask Thomas for jumper cables. I would have to beg. "Please," I whispered. I put the key in the ignition. "Please." I turned the key. The engine made a sluggish, wheezing sound. Rrrr. Then silence. My heart stopped. The silence in the car was absolute, heavy with the weight of my failure. I gripped the key. I could feel Cassie looking at me. She was not crying anymore. She was just waiting for the next disaster. "Mom," she whispered. "It is fine," I said. I pumped the gas pedal, a trick my dad had taught me 20 years ago for a different junk car. It just needs a second. I turned the key again. Pop. The engine caught. It roared to life with a jagged, uneven idle, shaking the entire dashboard. I let out a breath that was half sob, half laugh. I shifted into drive before the car could change its mind. I pulled away from the curb, not daring to look back at the house. I drove down the winding hill, past the stone fences and the perfectly manicured trees. I did not breathe easy until we passed the gate and hit the public road. Only then, when the mansion was a speck in the rearview mirror, did I allow myself to feel the shaking in my hands. We were safe. We were poor, we were robbed, and we were freezing, but we were away from them. We did not go straight home. I could not face the empty apartment yet, could not face the silence where the Christmas tree should have been bigger, where the presents should have been better. We drove to the Silver Spoon, a 24-hour diner on the edge of town with fluorescent lights that buzzed and vinyl booths that stuck to your thighs. It was mostly empty, just a few truckers and a tired waitress named Barb who knew my order. We slid into a booth by the window. The heater under the table was blasting, and for the first time in hours I felt my shoulders drop. "2 hot chocolates, please," I told Barb, "and a basket of fries." Barb nodded, not commenting on the fact that it was Christmas Eve and we were eating French fries. She looked at Cassie. "Extra whipped cream?" Cassie nodded. "Please." When Barb left, I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app, keeping the screen tilted away from Cassie. I waited for the little loading circle to spin. Current balance, $42.16. I did the math in my head. The fries were $6, the drinks were $3 each. That left me with $30. Gas was half a tank. Rent was due in 7 days. I had a paycheck coming on Friday, but it was already spent on bills I had juggled from last month. "Mom," Cassie said. She was shredding a paper napkin into tiny white strips. "Yeah, baby. Is it true?" "What Aunt Victoria said? That we are poor?" I looked at her. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her that we were fine, that it was just a temporary setback. But she was 14. She saw the car. She saw the apartment. She saw the way I put groceries back on the shelf when the total got too high. "We are struggling, Cass," I said, choosing the words carefully. "Money is tight. But we are not failures. There is a difference." "But the money Grandma left," she said. "Aunt Victoria said you lost it." "She lied," I said. The anger flared up again, hot and sharp. "I did not lose it. She took it, and I am going to get it back." "How?" Cassie asked. "You do not have a lawyer. You do not have money for a lawyer." "I will figure it out," I said. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I promise you, I will figure it out." Barb dropped the fries and the hot chocolates on the table. The steam rose up, smelling of sugar and grease. It was the best smell in the world. "Eat," I said. "It is Christmas dinner." Cassie picked up a fry. "It is better than the truffle potatoes," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "Those tasted like dirt." I laughed, and for a second, the crushing weight on my chest lifted. The apartment was cold when we got home. I turned the thermostat up 2 degrees, mentally calculating the cost of the electricity, then decided I did not care. We needed warmth. Cassie went to her room to text her friends, probably to explain why her Christmas posts were of diner fries instead of a mansion. I went to the closet in the hallway. I pulled down a plastic tote bin labeled "Important Documents" in permanent marker. I dragged it to the living room floor and popped the lid. It smelled of dust and old paper. I needed the will. I knew I had a copy. Grandma had given us each a copy in a blue folder 5 years ago. I remembered holding it. I remembered thinking it was too heavy to read right then, that I would look at it later. I was disorganized. Victoria was right about that. I was the chaotic sister, the one who lost keys, the one who forgot appointments. She had weaponized my own flaw against me. She counted on me losing that paper. I dug through the box. Tax returns from 3 years ago, Cassie's immunization records, a lease agreement for an apartment we lived in 2 moves ago, a drawing Cassie made in kindergarten. I pulled out everything. I made piles on the carpet. "Where is it?" I whispered. I found a birthday card from my mother, sent 4 years ago. The front had a generic floral picture. Inside, her handwriting was spidery and rushed. "Happy birthday, Jordan. Hope you are getting your life together. Love, Mom." I stared at the card. Even back then, even on my birthday, the judgment was always there, woven into the ink. I dug deeper. I found the program from Grandma's funeral. I found a recipe card for her apple pie, but the blue folder was gone. I sat back on my heels, surrounded by the debris of my life. I closed my eyes and tried to think. Had I thrown it out? Had I left it in a move? Or had I given it to Victoria? A memory flickered. 3 years ago. Victoria had come over to help me organize. She had brought a label maker. She had been so helpful, so efficient. "Let me take the important stuff to the safe deposit box, Jordan," she had said. "You do not want this lying around where it could get water damage." I gasped, my eyes flying open. She took it. She had come into my home under the guise of sisterhood, and she had disarmed me. She had removed the evidence before she even committed the crime. I was not just disorganized. I was played. 2 days later, the reality of my promise to Cassie crashed into the reality of my bank account. I was driving to the clinic. It was 6 a.m, the sky the color of a bruise. Snow was falling, wet and heavy, slapping against the windshield. The wipers were streaking, blurring the red taillights of the car in front of me. The grinding noise in the engine had been getting worse for 48 hours. I had turned up the radio to drown it out, the universal strategy of the broke. If I cannot hear it, it is not happening. I was stopped at a red light on 4th Street when it happened. The car shuddered violently like a wet dog shaking itself dry. The lights on the dashboard flickered. Battery, oil, check engine, all flashing in a terrifying disco. Then a loud clunk, a sound of something heavy and vital breaking loose. The engine died. The heater cut out instantly. The silence was sudden and absolute. "No," I said. I hit the steering wheel. "No, no, no." The light turned green. The car behind me honked. I turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. The car was a brick. I sat there as the cars behind me started to honk, a chorus of angry commuters. I put my forehead against the steering wheel and screamed. I screamed until my throat hurt, a primal sound of frustration and fear. I had to call a tow truck. I had no choice. I waited 40 minutes in the freezing car, seeing my breath puff out in white clouds. When the truck finally arrived, the driver was a burly man with a beard full of snow. He hooked up my Honda, dragging it onto the flatbed like a dead animal. I rode in the cab with him to the mechanic. The heater was blasting, but I could not stop shivering. "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Hookup fee is $80, $3 a mile." "Probably looking at $120 total," he said, not looking at me. $120. I had $30. Can I pay you on Friday?" I asked. "I get paid on Friday." He looked at me then. His eyes were tired. "Lady, this is a business. Cash or card." I used the credit card, the one that was maxed out. I prayed there was a buffer, a grace amount. The machine whirred. It thought about it. It approved. I let out a breath. I had bought myself time, but I had dug the hole deeper. I was now negative. I was underwater. The waiting room at Miller's Auto Repair smelled of burnt rubber and stale cigarettes. I sat on a plastic chair that had a crack in the seat pinching my leg. I had called work to say I would be late. My boss had sighed, that long, disappointed sigh that meant I was on thin ice. I was staring at a poster on the wall explaining the difference between synthetic and conventional oil when the door banged open. A woman stomped in, shaking snow off a faux fur coat that had seen better days. She looked to be about 50, with hair dyed a violent shade of red and lipstick to match. She was holding a vape pen in one hand and a broken side view mirror in the other. "I told you," she yelled at the mechanic behind the counter. "I did not hit the pole." The pole jumped out at me. The mechanic, a guy named Stan, who looked like he had not slept since the 90s, just rolled his eyes. "Brenda, just put it on the counter." Brenda. The name triggered something in my brain. She threw the mirror down and turned around, huffing. She saw me sitting there. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. "Nothing," I said, quickly looking down at my hands. She narrowed her eyes. She took a step closer, squinting through the haze of vape smoke she had just exhaled. "Wait a minute," she said. "You are the sister." I looked up. "Excuse me?" "You are Victoria's sister," she said. "The nurse, the one with the kid. Jordan, right?" I blinked. "How do you know who I am?" She laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Honey, I was Victoria's personal assistant for 3 years until she fired me 6 months ago for gross incompetence, which is rich, considering she can't even convert a PDF. I stared at her. This was Brenda, the woman Victoria used to complain about constantly. Brenda forgot my dry cleaning. Brenda smelled like peppermint schnapps at 10 a.m. "Small world," Brenda said, dropping into the chair next to me. She took a long drag from her vape. "So, did she finally cut you off? You look like you just got run over by a reindeer." "My car died," I said. "And, yeah, she kinda did." Brenda nodded knowingly. "Let me guess. The trust fund?" My head snapped toward her. "How do you know about the trust fund?" Brenda exhaled a cloud of berry-scented vapor. "I managed her calendar, sweetheart." I saw the appointments, or rather, the lack of them. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent beneath the heavy eyeshadow. "You know she never went to those meetings either, right?" Brenda said. "Because they did not exist. But she did go to Delaware a lot." "Delaware?" I asked. "Why Delaware?" Brenda smirked. "That is where she set up the shell company. VM Holdings. She used to make me mail checks there, weird checks, from the estate account." My heart started to hammer against my ribs. A shell company. Checks. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Brenda looked at her broken mirror on the counter, then back at me. "Because she fired me via text message on my birthday, and because she owes me 2 weeks of severance pay she says I don't deserve." She dug into her purse and pulled out a crumpled business card. She scribbled a number on the back. "I still have some of her passwords," she whispered. "Not the bank ones, she changed those. But the cloud storage?" "She uses the same password for everything, the name of her first pony, Buttercup." She shoved the card into my hand. "Burn her, Jordan. Burn her to the ground." The bus ride to downtown took 45 minutes and smelled of wet wool and diesel fumes. I sat near the back, clutching my purse to my chest, watching the city slide by through a window smeared with grime. Without a car, the geography of my life had expanded, become harder and colder. I had to transfer twice, standing on slushy corners while luxury SUVs splashed dirty water onto the sidewalk. By the time I reached the marble steps of First National Bank, my feet were numb blocks of ice inside my boots. I walked in. The bank was a cathedral of silence, all polished stone and hushed whispers. It was the kind of place that made you feel guilty for having less than 6 figures in your checking account. I approached the teller, a young woman with impeccable eyebrows and a name tag that read, Tiffany. "I need to see the transaction history for the Mitchell Family Trust," I said, trying to sound authoritative. Tiffany typed on her keyboard, her nails clicking a rapid rhythm. She frowned at the screen. "I am sorry, ma'am. That trust was closed and the assets transferred out 5 years ago." "I know," I said. "I was a beneficiary. I need to see the withdrawal records." She shook her head. "Since the account is closed, only the executor can request those archives. That would be Victoria Mitchell." My hands gripped the edge of the granite counter. Please. I believe there was a mistake. A fraudulent mistake. I just need to see one document. I cannot help you without the executor present, she said, her voice dropping to that professional, dismissive tone that meant the conversation was over. I felt the tears pricking my eyes, hot and humiliating. I was not going to cry in a bank. I was not. Excuse me. A voice came from the desk behind her. An older man stood up. He wore a gray suit that had seen better days and thick glasses. He walked over to the counter. I am Mr. Henderson. I manage the Mitchell account for your grandmother, Patricia. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of recognition. You are the younger one, Jordan. You used to come in with her and steal lollipops from the jar. Yes, I whispered. That was me. Mr. Henderson looked at Tiffany. Take your break, Tiffany. I will handle this. When she was gone, he turned the monitor slightly so I could see the edge of the screen. I cannot print anything for you, Jordan. That would be a violation of policy. But I can look at the digital archives to verify a clerical error. He typed slowly, his fingers hunting for the keys. He pulled up a list of scanned documents. What am I looking for? He asked softly. The final withdrawal, I said, the day the account was emptied. He scrolled down. He clicked a file. An image popped up on the screen. It was a transfer authorization form dated 5 years ago. The amount was for $2,400,000. The glow of the monitor was the only light in my world. I leaned over the counter, squinting at the digital scan. The document was standard legal boilerplate, lines of text about authorizing the dissolution of the trust and the transfer of funds to VM Holdings, LLC. And there, at the bottom, were 2 signatures. Victoria's was a sharp, jagged scrawl, taking up 2 lines, and next to it was mine. I stared at my own name. It looked right. It looked exactly like I signed it on my driver's license. The loop of the J, the way I crossed the T with a slight upward slant, it was terrifyingly accurate. For a second, I doubted myself. Had I signed it? Had I blacked out a memory from 5 years ago? Then I leaned closer, my nose almost touching the screen. Zoom in, please, I said. Mr. Henderson tapped a key. The image expanded. The pixels blurred slightly, but the ink lines remained clear. I looked at the capital J. In a natural signature, the pen moves fluidly. The ink flows in a continuous stream, but on the screen, right at the bottom of the loop, there was a tiny microscopic bulb of ink. A hesitation mark. It was where the pen had stopped, just for a fraction of a second, while the hand holding it checked the original to make sure the trace was lining up. And there was another one on the letter N at the end. A slight tremor. It is a trace, I whispered. My blood ran cold. She put a piece of paper over my signature from something else, maybe a birthday card or a school permission slip, and she traced it. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He was studying the screen, his expression grim. That does look labored, he said carefully. He adjusted his glasses. Jordan, if this signature is not yours, a very serious crime has been committed. I need a copy, I said. I cannot give you a copy, he repeated. But he reached for a notepad on the counter. He wrote down a series of numbers. This is the transaction reference number and the notary stamp number. If you have a lawyer, they can subpoena the bank for the official file. Once a subpoena is filed, we are legally required to preserve the evidence. It cannot be deleted. He slid the paper across the marble. Get a lawyer, Jordan. Fast. I found Parker's name on a bus bench advertisement that had been partially defaced with spray paint. Injured? Cheated? Call Parker. It was not the kind of marketing that inspired confidence, but it was the kind that suggested affordability. His office was in a strip mall between a vape shop and a struggling dry cleaner. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and lemon floor cleaner. The carpet was a shade of brown that seemed designed to hide stains. Parker himself matched the office. He was a man in his 50s with a rumpled shirt and hair that looked like he had run his hands through it 100 times that morning. He sat behind a desk covered in stacks of paper, eating a sandwich with one hand while typing with the other. "So, let me get this straight," Parker said, wiping mustard off his lip with the back of his hand. "You are broke. Your car is dead. And you want to sue a woman who lives in a mansion and has a husband on Wall Street?" "Yes," I said. I sat on the edge of the chair, clutching the scrap of paper from Mr. Henderson. He sighed and leaned back, the chair groaning in protest. "Look, Miss Mitchell, these cases are expensive. Forensic handwriting experts cost $3,000 just to walk in the room. Depositions cost money. Filing fees cost money. Do you have a retainer?" "No," I said. "Then I cannot help you. I am running a business, not a charity." I stood up. I felt the desperation clawing at my throat, but I pushed it down. I placed the scrap of paper on his desk right next to his sandwich. "That is the transaction number for a $2.4 million theft," I said. "I saw the signature. It is a trace. And I have a witness who knows about the shell company in Delaware." Parker stopped chewing. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. "Shell company?" he asked. "VM Holdings," I said. "Victoria Mitchell Holdings. She funneled the trust money into it 5 years ago. My signature on the release is a forgery." Parker picked up the paper. He studied the numbers. He looked at me again, assessing my cheap coat, my wet boots, the fire in my eyes. He was looking for the crazy. He was looking for the lie. But he did not find it. He swallowed the bite of sandwich. "If we win, I take 40%, he said. 30, I countered. 35, he said, and you pay the filing fees. $200. "I do not have $200, I said. He stared at me. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a fresh yellow legal pad. "Fine," he grumbled. "I will front the fees. But if you are lying to me, Jordan, I will sue you for the cost of the ink. Sit down. Start from the beginning." Parker worked fast. While I talked, he was already typing on 2 different screens. He pulled up the probate records from the county archives. Since Grandma's will had gone through probate, it was a public record. Victoria could hide the money, but she could not hide the original instructions. "Here it is," Parker muttered, scrolling through a PDF on his screen. "Patricia Mitchell, last will and testament." He scanned the document, his eyes darting back and forth. He hummed to himself. "Standard distribution, trust structure. Okay, here we go." He stopped scrolling. He leaned in closer to the monitor. Then he started to laugh. It was a dry, raspy sound like sandpaper on wood. "What?" I asked. "What is it?" "Your grandmother was a smart lady," Parker said. He spun the monitor around so I could see. "Read Section 14, Paragraph C," he said. "It is called a no contest clause, but this one has teeth. It is a forfeiture clause specifically regarding fraud." I leaned in and read the legalese. "In the event that any beneficiary is found by a court of law to have knowingly concealed assets, defrauded another beneficiary, or falsified documents regarding the estate, said beneficiary shall immediately forfeit their entire interest in the estate. The forfeited share shall be redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries." I read it twice. The words swam before my eyes. "What does that mean?" I asked, daring to hope. "It means," Parker said, tapping the screen with a pen, "that if we prove she forged that signature, she does not just have to pay you back your half, she loses her half." I stared at him. "Everything?" "Everything," Parker said. "The whole trust, the house she bought with it, the cars, the investments. If it came from that money, it is yours. All of it." I sat back in the chair. The room seemed to spin. I had walked in here hoping to get enough money to fix my car and maybe pay off my credit card. Now I was looking at a nuclear bomb. "This changes the strategy," Parker said, his voice serious now. "We are not just suing for damages. We are suing for total reclamation. But the burden of proof is on us. We need that signature analysis, and we need to make sure she does not liquidate the assets before we can freeze them. How do we do that? I asked. We file a temporary restraining order on the assets, Parker said. But the second we file, she will know. She will get a notification. Her lawyers will swarm. So what do? You go home, Parker said. You act normal. You do not tell her you have a lawyer. You let her think she won. We need the element of surprise. My phone vibrated in my pocket as I walked out of Parker's office. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from the falling snow. It was a text from Victoria. Mom is still crying. I hope you're happy. You ruined Christmas for everyone. My thumb hovered over the screen. The anger flared up, hot and instant. I wanted to type back, I know about the shell company. I wanted to type, I saw the signature. I wanted to tell her that I was coming for everything. But I heard Parker's voice in my head. Element of surprise. If I tipped her off, she could move the money. She could destroy hard drives. She could run. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air. I had to play the part. I had to be the beaten-down sister, the failure she expected me to be. I typed slowly, my fingers stiff with cold. I am sorry, I wrote. I was just stressed about money. The car broke down on the way home. I did not mean to cause a scene. I stared at the words. They tasted like bile. Apologizing to the woman who stole my life. It was humiliating. I pressed send. A moment later, the 3 little dots appeared. She was typing. I accept your apology, her reply read. But you need to apologize to Mom too, and maybe take some time to think about your priorities. We can talk in a few weeks when you are more stable. I lowered the phone. More stable. I looked at the gray sky. I was going to take her down. I was going to take it all, and until then, I would be exactly who she wanted me to be. Quiet, apologetic, and invisible. The adrenaline of the law office faded the moment I walked into my apartment building. Reality was waiting for me in the lobby. There was a piece of paper taped to the row of mailboxes, a list of units with overdue rent. My apartment number, 302, was at the top of the list, highlighted in yellow highlighter. I ripped it down before anyone else could see it, crumping the paper in my fist. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. Inside the apartment, Cassie was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when I entered. Did you fix the car? She asked. Not yet, I said. I hung my coat on the hook. It needs a part. It might take a few days. How are we going to get groceries? She asked. We will walk, I said cheerfully, walking over to the fridge to check the contents. We had a carton of milk, half a loaf of bread, and a jar of peanut butter. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my notebook. I opened the banking app on my phone. Balance. Negative $120. The tow truck charge had posted, pushing me into overdraft fees. I wrote down the numbers as words. Rent, $850. Utilities, $140. Phone bill, $60. I stared at the page. I needed over $1,000 just to survive the week. My paycheck on Friday would be barely $600 after taxes and insurance. I was drowning. The phone vibrated again. It was an email notification. My credit card statement was ready. Minimum payment due immediately, $85. I put the phone face down on the mattress. I put my head in my hands. The lawsuit would take months. Parker said these things moved slowly. I did not have months. I did not have days. A dark thought crept into my mind. I could text Victoria. I could ask her for that help she offered. I could beg for $500 just to keep the lights on. It would mean swallowing the last of my pride. It would mean admitting she won. But then I thought about Cassie eating peanut butter for dinner. I thought about the cold walk to the bus stop. I reached for the phone. I opened the message thread with Victoria. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Hey, Vic, about that help. I stared at the letters. I felt sick. I was about to sell my soul for groceries. I held the phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over the send button. The screen glowed in the dark bedroom, illuminating the shame on my face. The message was typed out, a pathetic plea for $500, phrased as a loan I knew I could never repay. I was about to trade my dignity for electricity. I was about to prove them right. The door creaked open. I jumped, quickly locking the phone screen and shoving it under my pillow. Cassie stood in the doorway, illuminated by the hallway light. She was holding a glass jar, the one we used for spaghetti sauce, now scrubbed clean. Inside, crumpled bills and coins were pressed against the glass. "Mom?" she whispered. I sat up, wiping my eyes. "What is it, honey? It is late." "I heard you crying," she said. She walked over to the bed and set the jar on the nightstand. It made a heavy, clinking sound. "There is $114 in there," she said, "from babysitting the neighbor's kids, and birthday money from Grandma 2 years ago." I stared at the jar. I stared at the girl who was offering me her entire net worth. My chest ached with a sudden, sharp pain that felt like a heart attack, but was actually just love. "Cassie." "No," I said. "That is your money. For the school trip." "I do not care about the trip," she said. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her hand on my knee. "I want you to take it. For the car. Or the rent. Whatever we need." I looked at her serious face, so much older than her 14 years. She was taking on burdens that should never have touched her shoulders. She was trying to save us because she thought I could not. I reached out and pulled her into a hug. I buried my face in her hair, smelling her strawberry shampoo. I held her tight, letting her strength seep into my bones. "I am not taking your money, Cass," I whispered into her hair. "But thank you. Thank you for being the best thing in my life." I pulled back and looked her in the eyes. "I have a plan," I said, "and this time I meant it. We are going to be okay. I promise." She looked at me, searching for the lie. She did not find one. "Okay," she said softly. When she left the room, I pulled the phone out from under the pillow. I opened the text message to Victoria. I looked at the words begging for help. I thought about Cassie offering me her babysitting money. I thought about Victoria sipping wine in a house bought with my inheritance. I held down the backspace key. I watched the letters disappear one by one. I deleted the plea. I deleted the weakness. I was not going to beg. I was going to fight. The next morning started with a problem I had not anticipated. Silence. Parker had told me he would file the motion at 9 o'clock in the morning when the courthouse opened. I was at the clinic scrubbing down an exam room between patients. The smell of antiseptic was sharp in my nose. Every time my phone vibrated in my pocket, I jumped, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was it Parker saying it was done? Was it Victoria screaming that she knew? I checked the time on the wall clock. 10 minutes past 9. I tried to focus on my work. I changed the paper on the exam table. I restocked the cotton swabs. But my mind was miles away, in a clerk's office downtown, imagining a stamp hitting a piece of paper. That stamp was the point of no return. Once it was filed, it was public record. Once it was filed, the clock started ticking on the restraining order for the assets. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. It was a text from Parker. Just 2 words. "It is filed." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I leaned against the cold counter, feeling the adrenaline crash through my system. It was real now. I had sued my sister. I had accused her of fraud in a court of law. But the relief was short-lived. Now came the waiting. Parker had explained that the judge would review the request for an emergency asset freeze within 24 hours. Until the judge signed it, Victoria could still move money. If she checked the court docket, if she had an alert set up for her name, she would know. I put the phone away and walked back out to the nurse's station. My hands were shaking. I felt like a spy in enemy territory, waiting for my cover to be blown. "Nurse Mitchell?" Dr. Evans called out. "Patient in room 3 needs a flu shot. Coming," I said. I walked down the hall, forcing myself to put one foot in front of the other. I had started a war, and now I had to go give a flu shot. The absurdity of it made me want to laugh, but I knew if I started, I might not stop. It happened at lunchtime. I was sitting in the break room, eating a sandwich I had brought from home, staring at the wall. My phone lit up on the table. It was a number I did not recognize. "Hello?" I answered, my voice wary. "Is this Jordan?" a voice rasped. It was Brenda. "Yes," I said, sitting up straighter. "You are going to want to hear this," Brenda said. I could hear wind in the background, like she was standing outside. I still have the notifications on my phone for her primary American Express. I never deleted the app because I liked watching her spend money she did not earn. "Okay," I said. "What happened?" "She just tried to buy a handbag at the mall," Brenda said. "A big one. $5,000. "And?" "Declined," Brenda said. The word was heavy with satisfaction. Insufficient funds, or rather, account frozen. I gasped. "Already?" "The judge must have signed the order," Brenda said. "She tried it twice. Then she tried the Visa. Declined. Then she tried the debit card. Declined." I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Victoria at the counter, the sales clerk looking awkward, the line of people behind her shifting impatiently, the panic rising in her chest, the realization that the infinite well had run dry. "She is calling the bank right now," Brenda said. "I can see the activity log. She is freaking out. She thinks it is a mistake. She thinks it is a glitch." "It is not a glitch," I whispered. "No," Brenda laughed, a dark smoker's cackle. "It is justice. She is going to leave the store empty-handed. She is going to walk out to her Mercedes and realize that might be gone soon, too." "Thank you, Brenda," I said. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just bury her." I hung up. I looked at my sandwich. Suddenly, I was not hungry. I felt a surge of energy, a fierce, hot joy. For 5 years, she had held all the cards. Today, I had taken the deck away. The joy lasted exactly 40 minutes. Then the phone rang again. It was Aunt Linda. I stared at the screen. They knew. The freeze had hit and Victoria had called the cavalry. I took a deep breath. Parker had warned me about this. "Do not engage," he had said. "Do not explain. Do not defend." I answered. "Hello, Aunt Linda." "Jordan, sweetheart," Linda's voice poured through the speaker, thick with syrup and artificial concern. "We are all so worried about you." "I am fine," I said. "I am at work." "Victoria just called us in a panic," Linda continued, ignoring me. "She said there is some kind of mix-up with the bank accounts and your name is attached to it." "Something about a lawsuit?" "Yes," I said. "Oh, honey," Linda sighed. "We know you have been under a lot of stress lately. Being a single mother, the financial struggles. It takes a toll on a person's mind." I gripped the phone tight. "What are you saying, Linda?" "We just think you might be having a breakdown," she said gently. "Lashing out at your sister like this, making up stories about fraud. It is not rational, Jordan. It is a cry for help. It is not a breakdown," I said. "It is the truth." "We are willing to pay for a therapist," Linda said. "A good one. Someone who can help you work through this jealousy you have toward Victoria. It is poisoning you, dear. You need to drop this lawsuit before you embarrass yourself further. We just want you to get better." The toxic positivity was suffocating. She was painting me as the crazy one, the broken one, to protect the criminal. She did not care about my mental health. She cared about the family reputation. "I am not jealous," I said, keeping my voice flat and boring. "I am simply reclaiming what is mine." "Jordan, please," she said, her voice sharpening slightly. "Think about Cassie. Do you want her to see her mother dragged through court? Do you want her to know you attacked her aunt?" "I am doing this for Cassie," I said. "You are making a mistake," Linda said. "A very expensive mistake. We love you, but we cannot support this behavior." "I understand," I said. "Goodbye, Aunt Linda." I hung up before she could say anything else. I stood in the hallway, shaking. They were closing ranks. They were going to gaslight me until I broke. I left work at 5. It was already dark. The snow had turned to gray slush. I walked to the bus stop, keeping my head down, watching for ice. My phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my stomach turn over. Thomas. I considered not answering, but I knew if I did not, he would keep calling. Or worse, he would show up. I answered. Jordan, Thomas said. His voice was different than usual. Gone was the jovial uncle act. Gone was the condescension. This was cold, hard steel. Hello, Thomas. I have your complaint here in front of me, he said. My lawyers just sent it over. Okay. You are alleging forgery, he said. That is a felony, Jordan. You are accusing my wife of a felony. Because she committed one, I said. You have no proof, he said. You have a scratch on a piece of paper and a lot of resentment. But let me tell you what I have. I waited. The wind cut through my coat. I have a team of corporate litigators who bill more in an hour than you make in a year, Thomas said. We will countersue you for defamation. We will sue you for emotional distress. We will garnish your wages until you are living in a cardboard box. I am not afraid of you, I lied. My voice trembled. You should be, he said. And Jordan? I play golf with Dr. Evans, your boss. My heart stopped. It would be a shame if he found out his nurse was involved in a fraud scheme against her own family, Thomas said smoothly. He hates drama. He might decide you are a liability. Are you threatening my job? I asked. I am just telling you how the world works, Thomas said. Drop the suit by tomorrow morning or I make a phone call. The line went dead. I stood at the bus stop, the phone pressed to my ear. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He could do it. He could ruin me before I even got to court. He could take my job, my reputation, everything. I got home and locked the door. I put a chair under the handle. It was irrational, but I felt unsafe. I felt hunted. I was pacing the small living room trying to figure out what to do when Parker called. I picked up, expecting bad news. I expected him to say the judge had rejected the order. Jordan, Parker said. His voice sounded electrified. He was chewing something, maybe gum, rapidly. Did you hear from Thomas? I asked. He threatened me. Forget Thomas, Parker said. Listen to me. I have been digging through the financial records we got from the initial discovery. The stuff Brenda tipped us off about. VM Holdings, I asked. VM Holdings is not just a savings account, Parker said. It is a funnel. I traced the outgoing transfers. He paused for effect. The silence crackled on the line. Victoria did not just spend the money on handbags, Jordan. She transferred over $1 million to a company called Apex Strategic. I do not know what that is, I said. I did not either, Parker said. So I looked it up. It is a shell company registered to Thomas. And guess what Thomas used that money for? What? To cover margin calls on his client accounts, Parker said. He has been losing money for his investors for years. He used your grandmother's trust fund to plug the holes so nobody would notice. I sank onto the couch. My legs gave out. He stole it to cover his own failures, I whispered. Exactly, Parker said. And that changes everything. This is not just civil fraud anymore. This is securities fraud. This is money laundering. This is federal. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means we are not just suing them, Parker said. It means I am calling the SEC tomorrow morning. Thomas threatened you? Well, he just handed us the nail for his coffin. But if he goes to jail, I asked, fear mixing with the shock, what happens to the money? The assets are frozen, Parker said. They cannot touch them. But the feds will want to talk to you. You are the victim here, Jordan. You are the whistleblower. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. They thought they were untouchable, he said. But they were playing with a federal crime. You did not just catch a thief, Jordan. You caught a Ponzi scheme. I lowered the phone. I looked around my tiny, shabby apartment. I thought about Thomas's threat to get me fired. He was terrified. He was desperate. He wasn't just fighting for a house. He was fighting for his freedom. And I was the one holding the key to the cell. New Year's Eve arrived not with a bang, but with a series of frantic text messages that lit up my phone like a firework display. I was sitting on my couch, watching the countdown on a muted television while Cassie slept in the other room. Outside, the world was preparing to celebrate. Inside my phone, my sister's world was ending. Brenda was parked down the street from the mansion, shivering in her car, sending me updates with the breathless glee of an executioner. "They just breached the gate," her first message read. 4 black SUVs, federal agents. "They are not knocking, Jordan." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried to imagine the scene. The heavy oak doors I had walked through just a week ago, now being swarmed by agents in windbreakers, the crystal champagne flutes trembling on the table, the music cutting out. "They are bringing out boxes," Brenda wrote 5 minutes later, "computers, files. Thomas is arguing with a guy in a suit. He looks sweaty even from here." I felt a strange, cold detachment. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for them. This was a tragedy, the destruction of a family. But then I remembered the way Thomas had threatened my job. I remembered Victoria mocking my scrapbook. I remembered my mother watching me leave in the cold. They brought it on themselves, I whispered to the empty room. Brenda sent another message. "Oh my God, they are putting Thomas in the back of a car. Handcuffs, Jordan, actual handcuffs." I closed my eyes. It was happening. The SEC moved fast when they smelled a Ponzi scheme. Thomas was not just a thief, he was a liability to the market. And Victoria? "Victoria is screaming on the porch," Brenda typed. "She is trying to stop them from taking her laptop. An agent just pushed her back. She looks like a banshee." I set the phone down on the coffee table. I did not need to read anymore. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights reflecting off the dirty snow. Somewhere across town, the ball was about to drop. The year was ending, and so was their reign of terror. 3 hours later, at 2 a.m, a violent pounding on my door woke me from a doze. It was not a polite knock. It was a desperate, hammering assault that shook the frame. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. I checked the lock. I put the chain on. Then I cracked the door open 2 inches. Victoria stood in the hallway. She was still wearing her party dress, a silver sequined thing that looked ridiculous under the flickering fluorescent lights of my building. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks in black streaks. Her hair was a bird's nest. She smelled of expensive vodka and panic. "Let me in," she hissed, pushing her face into the gap. "Jordan, let me in right now." "No," I said. "You have to," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "The press is at the house. The neighbors are watching. I have nowhere else to go." Mom is not answering her phone. "Go to a hotel," I said. "My cards are declined," she screamed, slamming her hand against the wood. "You know they are declined. You did this." I stepped back, looking at the ruin of my sister. She looked small, without her mansion, without her money, without her sneer. She was just a terrified woman in a hallway she would have turned her nose up at yesterday. "I did not do this, Victoria," I said calmly. "You did. You forged the signature. You stole the money. You gave it to Thomas to cover his crimes. I did it for us," she cried, "to keep the family name respectable. Do you have any idea how much pressure I was under? To be perfect, to be the success story? You gotta be the mess, Jordan. You had it easy. I had to carry everyone." I stared at her. The delusion was absolute. "I had it easy?" I asked. "Raising a child alone on a nurse's salary while you stole my inheritance? Driving a car that died on the highway? You call that easy?" "I can fix it," she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. She dug into her clutch with shaking hands. "Look, I have cash. I have jewelry. This ring is worth $10,000. Take it. Just tell your lawyer it was a mistake. Tell them you signed the paper." She tried to shove a diamond ring through the crack in the door. It clicked against the chain. "You are trying to bribe a witness," I said. "That is another felony, Victoria." "Please," she sobbed, sliding down the door frame until she was kneeling on the dirty carpet. Please, Jordan, I am your sister." "My sister died 5 years ago," I said. I closed the door. I slid the deadbolt home. I listened to her weeping in the hallway for 10 minutes until the building manager came up and threatened to call the police. Then finally, silence. The silence lasted until noon the next day. Then my mother arrived. She did not knock. She used the spare key I had given her for emergencies, a key she had never used once in 4 years because she never visited. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the door opened. Mom walked in, wearing a heavy wool coat and a look of pure fury. She did not say hello. She walked straight up to me and slapped me across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the small kitchen. My cheek burned. I stumbled back, catching myself on the counter. "How could you?" she screamed. Her face was red, her eyes bulging. "You destroyed him. You destroyed Thomas." I touched my cheek, feeling the heat rising. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. "Thomas is a criminal, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "He stole millions of dollars. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He was providing for this family," she yelled. "He paid for your Uncle David's surgery. He paid for the country club. He took care of us. With stolen money," I shouted back. "With my money." And then she said it, the thing that finally severed the cord. "It was never your money," she spat. "You would have wasted it. You would have spent it on rent and groceries and tuition. Victoria and Thomas used it to build something. They built a legacy. And you burned it down because you were jealous." I froze. The words hung in the air, toxic and revealing. "You knew," I whispered. Mom stopped. She adjusted her coat, looking away. "You knew about the forgery," I said, stepping closer. "You knew she stole my share. That is why you backed up her lie about the meetings. You were in on it." "I did what was best for the family," she said stiffly. "Victoria is the executor. She made a command decision. I supported her." "You sacrificed me," I said. "You watched me struggle. You watched Cassie wear thrift store clothes. You watched me cry over bills, and you sat in their mansion drinking their wine, knowing it was bought with my life." Mom lifted her chin. "You are being dramatic, Jordan, as always. Now, you are going to call the prosecutor and tell them—" "Get out," I said. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house," I said. I walked to the door and held it open. "Give me my key. Jordan, be reasonable. Give me the key," I screamed. It was a sound I had never made before, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. Mom flinched. She dug the key out of her pocket and threw it on the floor. "You will regret this," she said. "You will end up alone." "I am already alone," I said. "I have been alone for years. I just finally realized it." She walked out. I slammed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood, breathing in the silence. My cheek still stung, but my heart felt lighter than it had in a decade. The fallout was swift and brutal. By Monday, it was front-page news. Local investment guru arrested in federal raid. Sisters at war. The trust fund scandal. I went to work at the clinic. I had to. I still needed the money. When I walked in, the waiting room went quiet. I could feel the eyes on me. People had seen the news. They knew I was the whistleblower. Dr. Evans called me into his office. I braced myself. I expected him to fire me, just like Thomas had threatened. He sat behind his desk reading a newspaper. He looked up over his glasses. "Is it true?" he asked. "About Thomas Mitchell?" "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. He folded the paper. "He tried to get me to invest $50,000 last month," Dr. Evans said. "He told me it was a sure thing, guaranteed returns." I stared at him. "If you had not filed that suit," Dr. Evans said, "I would have signed the check this week. You saved me my retirement, Jordan." He stood up and extended his hand. "Take the week off," he said. "Paid. You look like you need some sleep. And Jordan, if anyone bothers you, security will throw them out." I shook his hand, feeling the tears prick my eyes. It was the first kindness I had received from a man in authority in years. I walked out of the office. I passed the break room TV. It was showing footage of Thomas being led into the courthouse. He looked gray and shrunken without his expensive suit. Victoria was behind him, shielding her face with a scarf. They looked like strangers. They looked like ghosts. The legal process moved with surprising speed, lubricated by the undeniable evidence of the federal investigation. Thomas pleaded guilty to avoid a maximum sentence. He admitted to everything: the shell companies, the laundering, the theft of the trust. Because the trust funds were the seed money for his criminal enterprise, the forfeiture clause in Grandma's will was triggered immediately. The civil court did not even need a trial. Summary judgment was granted. 6 weeks after New Year's, I sat in Parker's office. The carpet was still brown. The coffee still smelled stale. But Parker was wearing a new tie. "It is done," he said. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. I looked at it. It was a bank transfer confirmation. The amount was staggering. It was not just my original $2 million. It was the entire remaining value of the trust, plus the liquidated assets seized from Victoria and Thomas before the government took their share of the fines. $2,800,000. I traced the zeros with my finger. "Is this real?" I asked. "It is real," Parker said. "And it is clean. The taxes are paid. The fees are deducted. That is yours, Jordan." I thought about the grinding noise of my Honda. I thought about the overdue rent notices. I thought about Cassie's jar of coins. "What happens to them?" I asked. "Thomas is looking at 10 years, Parker said. "Victoria gets probation and community service because she turned state's witness against him at the last second. But she is bankrupt. The mansion is gone. The cars are gone. She is moving in with your mother." I felt a pang of pity, sharp and brief. 2 miserable women locked in a small house together, feeding on their own bitterness. It was a punishment worse than prison. "Thank you, Parker," I said. He grinned. "Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother. She wrote a hell of a will." We did not buy a mansion. I did not want a fortress. I did not want stone walls and cold floors. We bought a yellow house on the south side of town. It had a porch swing and a big oak tree in the front yard. It had 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for Cassie, and one for a guest room, though I doubted we would have many guests from the family. On move-in day, the air smelled of spring rain and damp earth. I stood on the sidewalk looking at the house. My Honda, repaired finally, was parked in the driveway. It looked distinctively average next to the minivan I had bought for cash the day before. Cassie ran out the front door, her arms full of boxes. "Mom," she yelled, "the internet guy is here, and my room has a window seat." I smiled. I walked up the path, listening to the gravel crunch under my new boots. I touched the railing of the porch. It was solid. It was ours. I thought about Victoria. I wondered if she was thinking of me. I hoped she wasn't. I hoped she would forget me, just as I planned to forget her. I walked inside. The house was empty, echoing with potential. I sat on the floor of the living room in a sunbeam. I was 34 years old. I was a single mother. I was a nurse. And for the first time in my life, I was free. I pulled out my phone. I deleted the contact labeled Mom. I deleted Victoria. I deleted Thomas. Then I turned off the phone, lay back on the carpet, and listened to the sound of my daughter laughing in the room above me. It was the best sound in the world. Update. 3 months later, life is quiet now, and I love it. The money sits in a boring, low-risk index fund, minus the cost of the house and Cassie's college fund. I still work at the clinic, though I went down to 3 days a week so I can take classes. I am studying to be a nurse practitioner. Thomas is serving his time at a minimum security facility upstate. Rumor has it he works in the laundry. Victoria works as a receptionist at a dental office. I saw her once at the grocery store. She was buying generic brand cereal. She saw me, and for a second I thought she would scream. Instead, she just turned her cart around and walked down the dog food aisle to avoid me. Mom sends me letters. They are unopened in a box in the garage. Cassie asked if she could read them, and I told her she could when she is 18. Until then, we protect our peace. Last night, we made dinner in our new kitchen. No truffle, mashed potatoes, no prime rib, just tacos and too much hot sauce. We laughed until our sides hurt. We are not perfect. We still have bad days. But we have something they never had, despite all their millions. We have enough. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.